Welcome back to Story Hustler, Murder, Mayhem, PTSD. I'm
And
Dylan.
I'm Mike.
Like and subscribe. We're following more in depth on the polygamy story. That's all we really talk about nowadays. But specifically on the new renegade prophet, Sam Bateman, who is going to be in court a week from today,
A week from
actually.
today.
But also just a man who has a wealth of knowledge about the FLDS, Worth Bistline. Thank you so much for being on our show today. We're very excited to talk to you.
Hey, how's it going?
It's great to. We have been honestly talking about having you on our show for the last 2 years, ever since we became acquainted shortly after I got acquainted with Sam Bateman. And we've had a dialogue going on. And Worth is a man with all kinds of knowledge, again, about growing up in the FLDS community, but now more specifically with the story of Sam Bateman in the headlines. He's back in court. Worth, thanks for being with us. And dive in. Tell us what your connection with Mr. Bateman is.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I should mention that my introduction to Mike Wakas here. One day I was scrolling Facebook and I saw a picture of Mike and Sam Bateman and my entire family, like a bunch of people that were kind of associated with my family and a bunch of them. And so I just messaged him on Facebook and said, "What is this?" And I'm sure you've covered the story many times of how Sam called you and wanted to meet up, and so that's where we started talking. And I made me very interested because in many ways, I know I know less of some things because like the court cases and following all the details of that, I know less of. I know the path that my family took to get in with Sam Bateman, and I mean, it's a doozy. It's mind-boggling to me. Just for instance.
Well, and having that discussion, and you were so enlightening for me. I had no idea what I'd gotten myself into when I met Sam. But we'll go to that. We'll go into that and maybe in a minute. But Worth, give us a sense. You again, you grew up in the FLDS community. You got out, but members of your family were still in. And then they sort of crossed paths with Sam Bateman. When did that happen, and what happened?
Yeah, so just a really rough introduction. Yes, I did grow up in the FLDS. I spent essentially 25 years embedded in the FLDS. I was very committed, you might say. I don't think I ever would have left, but I was kicked out by Lyle, and ended up moving to LA. It took 3 years for me to even start questioning the religion, even being out. So it was a long, drawn out process. Essentially, went to school, got a degree, and just because of how committed I was, it was a long time before I would come back around and even talk about it in a negative way. And there is a lot of good things that it's like principles. Principles, there's certain principles that are good, certain principles that I want to have in my life, but then there's a dark turn. And I would say Sam essentially is an epitome of that. Now, when Warren went to prison, there was a long time of him just running the FLDS from prison, and you fast forward years and years, and he kind of comes in and out with his communication and talking to people, and he would appoint a bishop, and then he would kick them out a week later sometimes, and it's just kind of bishop roulette there for a minute. And so nobody knew who was in charge. And, someone would show up and say, "Hey, I'm the new guy." And half the people would believe him, half the people wouldn't. There's all kinds of rumors and schemes, and it just kind of just fractionated the people at that point. So I like to make the phrase of, like there's these commandments that come down, and then there's a point where these commandments expire. And that is where your human nature takes over and you start living your life. But then as soon as someone else comes back in and starts throwing more commandments out, it's like, well, we need to get in line again. We need to, you start getting that cognitive dissonance of, I believe this, yet I'm living something else. And so it's very interesting to watch as people shift out and then shift back in and then shift back out. And some go hardcore in and others kind of fall off and leave. So my family was we're kind of 50-50. You know, some of my brothers, Torrance has been in the news quite a bit. Him and Liddell Jr. are in prison right now due to this Sam Bateman thing. But
These are brothers.
Torrance was
These are brothers of yours that are currently incarcerated.
Torrance, yes, Torrance
And
is
so folks know your brothers are involved, and then you have sisters and nieces who are would I
yeah,
guess sort of fall into the victim category of
yeah.
this story. Yeah.
Yeah, and it depends on how wide you throw that net. So I have sisters that are underage that are victims. I have nieces that are underage that are victims, and I have moms that are involved. And at what point do you draw the line of, hey, you're a victim because you were sucked into this thing that you probably never would have if you had let life just run its regular course without someone manipulating them to the extent that Sam did. So Torrance got sent away shortly after me, and just the same process. Went out, was relatively successful. He had some jobs, became prominent in a certain, I guess it's a trenching application, and that trenches cables into windmills. And then he went home and designed and built what does he call it? The Velociraptor. He designed and built this, sat on it for a few years, and then he was hanging out with us, drinking, going to our family reunions. He was kind of on that outside, and then he was invited back in by Liddell Jr. And you don't underestimate the value of, or the pull of family, the pull of, hey, I can now talk to my mom again, who I idolize. We idolized our parents. I never saw them. I used to brag about how I never saw them ever fight. My dad was very much a stick by the rules, most honest guy I know. And then my mom's got along famously. So I recognize the pull of that, of him wanting to go back in there and be accepted back into the family. So he did. And Sam told him, said, hey, take that Velociraptor and run with it. And so Torrance, and here's how I look at it. He's a very intelligent guy. He designed and built this. He did not have the gumption to push it through. And so with Sam telling him to, he thought, this is God essentially telling me to do this. And so he pulled out all the stops, went to every trade show, went to all the lengths to push this thing into success, which it became very successful. And he, over the course of a couple of years, he became very, very wealthy. I shouldn't say very, very wealthy, but he became wealthy enough that he was comfortable, and the future was looking bright. And so from there, he became an integral part of Sam's organization,
And that's
and
yeah.
was the financier of all of it.
I wanted you. You're talking when you're talking about Torrance and Liddell. These are brothers of yours.
These are my brothers. Yes, Torrance is the
And
next one
Torrance.
younger than me.
Well, Torrance, I think when I met Sam, showed me some videos that he had produced about this piece of machinery
Yes.
that made him very wealthy. Sam wanted your brother in because suddenly he saw somebody with a lot of money. And that certainly was that part of the appeal of Sam pulling your brother into his little group?
I mean, you can speculate that, and it makes perfect sense. I don't know that for a fact,
Yeah.
but it makes sense. It makes sense that he sees some successful person. I think what he was actually looking for is someone that would commit to him.
Right.
Whether you're successful or not, and the successful part is an absolute bonus.
Who
So
bankrolled? Who bankrolled? Just so well, we're on this money point. Who? When yeah, we talked about Sam having Bentleys and having boasting to me about airplanes and stuff like that. Who was bankrolling all that?
that was Torrance.
That was so that
Your
was the
brother.
That was
brotherhood.
my brother. That was my younger brother, Torrance. Yes, he was bankrolling all of that. So, and then everybody worked for him in this company that he made. So just backing up a little bit, just my sense. I mean, I remember playing basketball with Sam as a young kid. I remember he was very athletic. I remember watching him. He's a short guy. You stood next to him, right? I remember watching him hit his head on the basketball rim. He would jump and kick and get a little higher. He's very athletic. He was kind of a crazy guy, younger. Him and his brother Jerry. They had a plane, and they would do a bunch of crazy stuff with that, buzzing people with it. And And I grew up on the airport. So I have, I think, 8 brothers that are pilots now. And, I'm going to brag just like Sam, because you can't go 5 minutes without, I am a pilot myself too. So let's just get that out of the way. And so I was associated with him quite a bit. And then I can't remember how old he was when he was on his way to Canada, had an accident, and he was in a coma. If my memory serves me right, I feel like it was like a month that he was in a coma.
Right.
And he was never the same after that. I don't know as far as like the visions and the complications and the oh man, my words, illusions of grandeur. There we go. That he had later on. But I didn't see that earlier on, but he definitely changed, and he had like a way more soft spoken manner. And I work with one of my cousins right now that worked with him at Western Precision, which was this machining company down in Las Vegas. And it was kind of a running joke for the guys down there to send people into the quality control department, because Sam worked in there because he couldn't work with anybody else, because you'd go in there and he'd immediately start telling you, these visions that he had, and these other women that he was supposed to marry that belonged to him that were married to other men. And he would have this whole spill, and these guys just thought it was a great joke. And they would, the new guy would start, and they would send him in there to quality control some part, and then sit there by the window and laugh. And he eventually quit that company. And this is one of the kind of the tragic but interesting things about the FLDS. I mean, Warren was doing these pulling families apart and taking women from men and putting them with other men, and this whole, fruit basket upset. And that happened with Sam. He took his family away from him while he was working for Western Precision, and essentially gave them to his boss, who was John Wayman, who was kind of up in the church. And
Sam gave his family to this older.
Warren gave Sam's family to
Warren did. Okay.
Yes. And Sam had been he had been acting in these strange manners, telling people what a evil person John Wayman was and all of this. And especially when he took his family, John Wayman became the devil to him. And he messaged all of his wives one day and told them, hey, you need to get away from this man. And so John Wayman went in there to him and tried to talk to him and was saying, hey, what can we do for you? And Sam plugged his ears and walked around him, didn't make eye contact, and left. And that was the last day he worked at Western Precision. So everybody looks at this guy as he's crazy. He's crazy. Who would listen to this guy? And so it was so mind-boggling when, I got wind that my family was actually interested in him and following him. Now, Moroni was a whole other story, and I actually feel like Moroni Johnson and my brother Liddell were the ones that were kind of the pillars that brought people into Sam. My brother.
Well, we should just note this. Moroni
pled guilty.
Just as in the news this week, Moroni Johnson, the man you're referencing here, has pled guilty to a significantly reduced charge.
Yeah.
And it tells me that he's probably going to end up testifying against Sam. But so these are the people, the men who you think helped prop Sam up.
Absolutely, 100%. And especially Moroni. Moroni was going around for years, gathering up Warren's wives, trying to get them to essentially marry him. I don't know what term he was using. I know of some firsthand that I was talking to one of them while on the phone while he was calling another one and trying to convince her to move over with him, and he was going to take care of her. And it was just bizarre. And he was gathering all of these, or attempting to gather up all these women. And then when Sam showed up into the picture, he submitted to Sam essentially. And I'm sure you've seen the YouTube video and heard that video of Moroni pledging himself to Sam, pledging his family to Sam, all of that. So
how does that help us out?
Yeah, I don't understand that. If he's
How
trying
does
to
it
course all
happen?
these women and then he's just gonna
What
blindly follow.
what is it? Why does a
What's
guy?
the draw?
Yeah, and this is obviously this is a profound question, but and you talk about people getting in and then going back out. I mean, getting out and going back in and everything, and it's just like at some point, what is it in the DNA and the water that for these folks just you can't seem to get out of the under the shackles of a cult? And a guy like Sam Bateman or a guy like Warren
I mean, you're
Jeffs.
giving up your family. At what point do you draw the line?
Yeah,
Where,
how
like,
do you
my
get there?
young daughters deserve better.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how deep you want to go because there's all kinds of psychological things, but essentially, I would say it's generations of this. It's generations of growing up this way, and what you see out in the world and what you see right in front of your face in other towns and everything. This is a sideshow. The main attraction is right here. What we're doing, we are the most important people on earth. There's someone right here. It's, you could back clear up to um say the early Mormon doctrines, and the way that we learned those was, look, here's God's prophet on earth. We are the chosen ones. We're essentially special to be able to know them, and there will always be a prophet on the earth. And if it's not one person, go find the prophet. They will be there. And this kind of generational teaching of there's someone that you can follow that will help you to get to heaven or help you succeed in life or whatever term you want to use. And this is all over. This isn't just the FLDS, right? But it runs deep there for sure.
Yeah, sounds like anyone can just stand up and say, "Follow me," and people will.
Well, it's not really that simple. It's there's always some outstanding factor to them. To Sam, I think it was just his undying commitment to what he thought and believed. He was willing to go to any length and talk. I think one of the ways that he brought them in, he started using like vulgar language and things that was very, very interesting. He was using shock value. And if you watch, some multi-level marketing or some of these sales techniques, a lot of times these people will use some kind of shock value to get people out of their programming, and then, oh, there's a new way to do something, and then they'll explain that, hey, here's why. And so they kind of stand out from the crowd. Most of the people are like, no, here's the Bible, here's the scriptures, this is how you live. And then he stood out in that way, just one way of many in which he stood out.
How do you
So
think
it's not.
how do you think he's similar and different from Warren Jeffs? In what ways, similarities and differences?
That one it's a really tough one for me because I followed Warren. And so trying to reconcile that and say, there's parts of me that would follow Sam too. I don't see that at all because I look at Sam as an idiot and I look at Warren as a lot smarter of a person. He played his cards a lot closer to his chest. He had, um, say, these places of refuge, which you would call compounds, all over. He was playing this game of cat and mouse, and I think that both of them. I think that Warren probably, and you can see this later on in his prison years, kind of waffled between, "Hey, I'm a fraud," and "No, I am still the guy. I am a fraud. No, I am still the guy." You see that quite a bit, which shows a little more. I don't know whether it's a show thing or whether it's some kind of thought process, internal thought process. Sam didn't have any of that. Sam was just the guy.
He was just hell bent on being famous, powerful, and having women.
Yeah, and he would show right to your face and just brag about it right to you. Warren would
Well,
never do.
and that's it helped. My theories in just looking at these two guys. Warren is a really different animal in that he inherited a very well established path of power.
Right. Absolutely.
Sam, as we refer to these guys as the renegade prophets, the guys who splinter off, the Tom Greens, Alex Joseph, some of these guys that you may have heard of over the years, but I've known a lot of them. And Sam falls into a pattern where he's going to go do his own thing. But
Right.
Warren inherited a very well. I mean, he inherited a town, a
Yeah.
municipality, a
And he
whole.
was so calculated with how he ran it from even under his father's
Right. And I'm not,
control.
but I don't think Warren had the personal charisma. He's
No.
probably smarter, but I agree with you on your point about Sam. I mean, I don't know what to make of Sam, whether he is just one of the dumbest people. In all due respect, why he would insist on a meeting with me. We've been tracking his things. You know, was he wanted attention, comes to me, gets attention, and then as soon as I make it people aware that I've had this interaction, I'm bombarded with people saying, "Oh, he's already under the microscope of the
Yeah.
cops. They're all over him." He goes, first thing he does in when he gets busted in Flagstaff is gets on the phone and starts telling people to delete messages. He
Right.
comes, he comes down to the prison here, and we had eyes inside the prison telling us what was going on. And he was at tablets every morning communicating with his, orchestrating that kidnapping. This guy has done every stupid thing to get himself in more and more trouble. And so I'm wondering, I think there's a big difference between Warren. I think they're motivated by the same pervy, control freak motives,
Yeah.
but they're very different personalities. Your take on
Totally
it?
agree. Yes. Yeah. And I would agree with that. Absolutely. Yeah, Sam just did a lot of dumb things, but he was so committed that he was doing the right thing is why it came across as so dumb. And also his followers say that whole meeting with you. He told them, "Look, we need to forgive and forget, and the Lord wants me to meet with these guys."
Is
And
that what he
they're
was?
like, "This guy,"
Is that
and
what
then
he
he
was
does
doing?
it.
Is
Yeah,
it?
yeah. No,
What was
God
it?
knows you. I
I
didn't
still
know
don't
this.
understand. Why the hell did he call me and insist on me? Do you know? What was, what was his motive?
It was a random thing with his followers. He was like, it's kind of like the Queen of England. Like, where did
Yeah.
that come? It's some harebrained thing, and he's telling his followers, if we believe something strong enough, it will happen. And and then he's like, you know what? We need to meet with Mike Watkins, and they're like, okay. He's like this horrible person. He's like, the Lord wants me to do it, and then he pulls it off, and he has them all there to watch while he does it.
But
And
I
then
also,
and it's this random thing to you, but to him, it's like, I just fulfilled prophecy. And to his followers, he's like, this guy is definitely a prophet. He pulled this off.
is he? I mean, well, it struck me like in the the vernacular of today, it seemed like he wanted to come down and flex for me. It, it was
No,
that.
I would absolutely agree with that. I think there's a part of him that's like, I'm going to go forgive and forget. But no, it was a flex. It was 100%. Look, we are like, how he couldn't imagine himself doing wrong. He's just doing God's will. So he'll show up to you. He's not going to bring these young women and say, "Hey, I'm married to this one. This kid is from this one." But he's going to have them there right next to you without you even knowing. And
Yeah,
it's kind of this bizarre power trip.
and I had no idea what I was getting into when I agreed to meet this guy. I thought it was just going to be him, and when he suddenly 2 dozen women and children, your
Poured out
sisters,
fans.
poured out of it. I
Right.
had no idea what this was. They ended up singing me some songs. I felt like I literally felt like I was dropped into the middle of a crime scene. Soon as I
Right.
women and children coming
They're
out.
so young.
So we've I want to share that video with you because it's our it's your family and but uh,
Absolutely.
but it's just my thinking is he does he seems very committed. I see that and is sort of charismatic and can talk up a storm and everything. But you just think, boy, this guy can't be that sharp. And you mentioned this traumatic brain injury he had.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know.
Right.
I don't want to give Sam any legal defenses, but his behavior is
Yeah, be
such.
careful.
And he's probably, if his lawyer was thinking, I would go in and argue this guy isn't right. You know, and I don't want to help Sam Bateman, but he has a whole. Do you think it was the traumatic brain injury? Obviously, guys declare themselves prophets without a bang on the head, but Sam definitely had some major trauma at one point in his life.
Well, it definitely didn't help.
Okay.
So no, I know he was vastly different after that, and the stories I heard later, he just is bizarre. So I didn't spend a lot of time with him personally after that. A lot of what I know is just through my family. So yeah, knowing who he was younger, he was always intense. He was always intense and very purposeful after what he was going after. So there is that. And the most bizarre part about this whole thing to me is how fast my family got involved and went from this FLDS thing of, being respectable, being as professional as possible, and, feel like not swearing. Like swearing was a bad thing. How fast they went from that to just absolutely, like, all of them use the F word. All of them, like, they will sit there and lie right to your face. And I didn't experience that. Like honesty was a lot of in the FLDS, and I realized that you experienced another side to that, where it's, if you're talking to an outsider and it's like, okay, this guy, we should lie to him, or we should at least, not mention the actual truth. But this is like straight up to your own family. Why don't you just ask me? And then we ask him, and it's like, no.
So, so let me. So you indicated that two of your brothers started
Yeah.
following Sam. One of them was sort of became his financial benefactor in many ways.
Hmm.
How how did the women and children? You when we spoke, you said you have two sisters and
And
two
nieces.
nieces in these about 10 people, 10 victims
Yes.
that are, you know them, they're your family. How did it go from your two brothers to having the women and children involved, and how are they doing now?
Yeah, are they okay?
Right. Yeah, they're okay. Unfortunately, it's been a long process, and I mean, within a month of them being taken by the state, they had flipped. They were like, okay, it's way better out here. That he had put so much pressure on them, and it's actually how he got so many of them in so quickly. It was so Liddell, my older brother, Liddell Jr. We call him Lud. He he very much has these grand, he can just explain any principle in such depth, and he's like this mad scientist type. And he explained all these things to them, and would work on them over and over. And then there was a point where he's like, you're either in or you're out. And then as soon as one of my sisters, got a testimony of Sam, then the rest followed suit fairly quickly. But they all knew that he was going to marry them. And there's a recording of my brother Lud. There was a time where some of these FLDS and slash ex FLDS boys were calling Sam and talking to him and recording it, pretending they were wanted to be a part of it. One of these, they were talking to my brother Lud, and they mentioned something about, wanting to get married or something, and Lud told them, if the only way you can have a wife or have a woman in your life is if you have priesthood in the spirit of God. And he's like, let me explain to you what that means. If there is only one man on the earth that has the spirit of God and priesthood, then every woman on earth belongs to him. And so you can see the way Moroni handed his family over, and how Lud handed his family over, and how all these other women got involved because they were involved and they were part of it. And then Sam eventually turned tables on them and said, you're out of order. You lost the spirit of God. And then, oh, well, crap, here's my family. Here's everything. I will repent to try to get back in the good graces of God. Basically. So that's how the younger, so Lud and his wife, let me finish that thought. That's how the younger ones got involved, because the older ones were. Lud had essentially abandoned his kids years before, when he was trying to get into this Sam thing. It took over his life. They were a little more wayward and didn't really want to be involved. And his oldest daughter basically took care of all the girls, and I guess it was all of them. There's a bunch of boys and a bunch of girls, and got a job, and I think she was 16, 17, his oldest daughter, for years. And then Lud gave his wife to Sam, and then ended up marrying his first cousin. And yeah, it's just a mess. I don't know how you get to that point.
Well, talk to us about
The
Sam.
young girl.
Sam
Yeah.
was arrested, and all the
Yes.
whole history. He's for those keeping track. Last time we checked, he's back in court for a status hearing.
Yes,
Yes.
next Friday, April 1st.
And
There's a
and
slew of charges like kidnapping and
oh, a myriad
trafficking
of
and
charges. But yeah, how does give us shed us some light on what started happening to these kids and your little sisters, your nieces. I guess you mentioned that the youngest victim is a 9-year-old. That's a niece of yours.
Yes.
You
The
know,
niece of mine.
you got a better sense. These kids, again, they're with a family, a relative of yours, and they are now safe. Is that correct?
Yes, they are. They're safe. They're with relatives. I saw some of them last weekend actually. They were allowed to travel out of the state and came up to Utah, and that were here basically mingling with us, and they were at an air show this last weekend with some family members that are out,
They
that
doing
are.
good? They doing okay?
Yes, absolutely. They're thriving, you could say.
Good to
that's
hear.
They're doing well in school. My little sister is really, really good at music. She's writing songs, and I mean, you go through some trauma and you can come up with some great music, you know. So
And the arts, I guess, yeah. Uh,
yes.
well, give us what happened to these
yeah,
kids?
what did they go through?
So
They got
so
in,
they
taking over the wives, then what happens?
yeah, so eventually, and I'm sure this was part of the goal, was to get to the young girls. And they started marrying him. So I had a couple younger sisters marry him, and then they worked on the younger ones, and the younger ones eventually married them. Now I have a younger sister that kind of went back and forth. She essentially left, and the type of pressure that he put on the rest of the group. He said, "It is our entire mission to bring her back. She is the next step in the redemption of Zion." And essentially, I think the way that they thought was like, maybe she's gonna have another immaculate conception and another Jesus or another some. That's the level they put on this. And she essentially was out for a while. She had a really bad experience working at a dairy, that scared her really bad, and she took it as a sign to go back in. So she went back in and married Sam. But we had got a lot of information from her in the meantime, and she was cryptic, and she wasn't quite sure what she believed. But from that, we knew that he was having kids with underage girls, and some of the details around that. And so some of us started calling CPS. I think CPS got called on him some 14, 15 times.
What time
And
frame? When was this?
Yeah.
oh man, I'm going to have a tough time with that. Let me think.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like he sort of came on the radar screen, or people started noticing him about 2019, 2018.
Yes, it would have been the year following when he went down, and because he met you in like October. Was it later in the year, or was it earlier in the year?
What?
It was December 20. He called
Okay.
calling me before, but we met on
December
December
2021.
27th, just after Christmas 2021. So it's just over 2 years ago.
2021.
Yeah,
Yeah.
late 2020.
See, that's when this really was hitting its stride, was right around that time. I would have stated that 2021 is really when this really took off. 2020 and the whole lockdown, they were kind of going back and forth. They were trying to work on some of the family. They jumped in early on in 2021.
Okay.
And then from there, it just went really fast. And so by the end of 2021, he was courting or maybe married to some of these young girls. So early on in the next year would have been those first few months that people were calling CPS on him. And I actually wanted to take a different approach. I was pushing to not get everybody involved because they were open. Sam was open. He was talking to everybody, and I'm like, he's going to hang himself. He's going to give us enough rope that we'll have enough evidence, But as soon as CPS started showing up, they really pulled in hardcore. And I mean, it worked out in the end. I think the method they used was great. He's in prison, everything. But so these young girls are pulled into this, and he essentially, one of them ended up leaving back out. My younger sister, the one that he put all that pressure on the group to get her back in, she left again. And this is where we got even more information. And we were driving past the house, spying on him, trying to get some type of idea. And they really took a martyr stance. They all thought what they would voice is, everybody's out to get us. Everybody's out to get us. We're so innocent. We're perfect. So fast forward just a little bit, and Sam gets pulled over with this trailer full of girls.
And that was just an accident. I mean,
Yeah,
that was just out.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, he's a dimwit.
He's
So,
a dimwit. But clearly, he set in motion. Cops were already on his tail, and
right, there was a ton of
hand.
And they wouldn't have even checked the trailer had they not seen fingers poking out of it. So it's like he would have just been driving with the trailer, that's not suspicious. They wouldn't have done anything. So that's just, I feel like, so lucky.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. There's that, but see, and then there's all these CPS calls. There's all this other smoke around it that's like, okay, this is really weird. And then they're calling the moms of these kids, and they're saying, no, they belong there. They're right where they should be. And so they almost, and I think they actually let him out, right? He went back home.
Yeah.
And the girls went home too. That's not when they actually took him into custody. This was like, here's a ticket. You guys are crazy. All the parents are,
Right.
saying this is fine. But it really, really threw up a giant red flag.
No doubt.
And made them get way more serious about it.
Right.
So I think it was just a couple months after that, maybe 1 month or 2 months after that the FBI went and raided.
Right. Well, so my meeting with him was just before the new year 2022, and then he gets busted with the kids in the trailer. Late summer,
Right.
2022, and then they let him out. But while he's in the Coconino County Jail again in Flagstaff for the kids in the trailer, he's sending up messages to delete everything, which gave the feds all kinds of new charges that they could hold him. Every step of the way, Sam's done the wrong thing in terms of his incarceration.
He thought he was going to represent himself.
Yeah, well, and we're disappointed, but he apparently does have a lawyer who I've spoken to on this telephone. Seems like a very no-nonsense guy. Didn't want to talk to me. But we've been laughing about it. It's not a funny subject at all. But the bottom line is when Warren represented himself in Texas, as painful as the charges were, it was one of the most slapstick comic presentations. Warren, made sure he got convicted just by being an idiot in court. And I was thinking Sam's more flamboyant, so it's going to be even more fun.
Well, I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah.
I think a lot of cards will fall when this happens. But
are you gonna go to the trial? Are you gonna try to watch?
I would love to. I'm crazy busy. If I know exactly when it is and all of that and it's dialed in, yes, I would love to be there and watch it. They look at me as one of the more rank apostates, actually, in the Sam group. Yeah. I dated some girls that he thought belonged to him.
Oh no.
And it was so it was anyways. Different times. I realized that sounded like I was a polygamist, but no, it was different times when I was dating him. But
you don't have to do any confessions on their show.
hey, just open book.
Fill in. So what happened over these years? Sam sort of comes to power or gets a sense of himself in 2018, and over till about 2000 end of 2022. What's he doing with these girls? You've learned some of the stories. And what would you do if you got Sam Bateman in a room for 10 minutes by yourself?
What would I do?
Yeah, what would you do?
Why are you asking me this right after you said I don't have to give you any confessions?
Well,
let's set this up.
Yeah, I don't no court orders here, but yeah, I mean, I think if it was my sister, my kid, and I was in a room, if I'd known what I know now, and I'd had that opportunity to do a face to face with Sam Bateman, it would be a different interaction. Knowing
Well,
what you know about this guy, what he's done to your sisters, your nieces, what would you say? What would you do to this guy?
well, what I will say, there's two really essential pieces to this. So even the darkest stuff, okay, like any red-blooded guy, I'm sure we would take our pound of flesh, right? But I don't understand some of the abuses that he heaped on even his so-called wives and things. Like there's stories of him getting up in his meeting and he's reading a sermon, and then he looks up at one of the women and he says, "Hey, so and so, get up here and confess that you're a wicked bitch." And she just stands up and walks up there and turns around and confesses that she's a wicked bitch, and then goes back down and sits down and he continues reading his sermon. And the way that he talked to my sisters, even that much, knowing that the way that he insulted them, I don't understand how my brothers stood there and listened to that. Like I could never do that. And the other piece to this, I'm sure you've seen that documentary on the girls in the Olympics, the Olympic gymnastics. I think it's called Behind U.S. Gold, and I'm
Um,
sure you remember the whole
Yeah,
thing
sure.
yeah.
with that doctor that was molesting young girls. The very end of that documentary, then there's a father of four of those girls in the courtroom, and oh man, he begged the judge. He said, "Give me 5 minutes in a room with this guy." And but I mean, this was after when they were bringing him out, and he basically vaulted over the railing and jumped on him, and then the cops were holding him down, and he was saying, "Just give me 5 minutes with him as part of his punishment." And yeah,
You can relate.
very much. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you, and it's interesting that you all, I mean, you told Sam accountable, but you're also PO'd at your brothers who got him in this and men who stood by. This has always been the dilemma for me, the parents, the adults, the adult
The
figures in
influence
the room are supposed to protect the kids and do, and
they're the
whether it's
influencers.
FLDS and Warren Tarrant families apart or Sam, preying on other families, it's just like, where's that noble person who's going to say this is wrong?
Well, it doesn't take just one noble person. It takes a community, and it takes a lot of work, and it takes being
Hard, yeah,
very intelligent about it and not doing anything stupid ourselves.
right.
And I feel like pound of flesh is satisfying, but in the long run, I would rather just see him rot in there and me be out here to raise my family in a better way, right? And so with my brothers, I go back and forth with them. I mean, these are my brothers. I grew up with them. Torrance is one of the most innocent people I know. He was committed to the FLDS. He never would have touched a girl without being commanded to by who he thought was his prophet. Like he was living for this chance to be married. And I know it's hard to understand if you're in the outside, because you go and date and you try to form a relationship and you work on this. But what we did is we tried to never think of girls and try to never let any of these evil thoughts enter our minds and work really hard on that. And that's through being a teenager and a young 20-year-old and all of that, working on that. And every time you failed at that, it's like, oh man, I'm a wicked person. And so watching him deal with that, he grew up with him, and he was successful at it. And he got to a point where I mean, he would have never had anything to do with the female. But then he gets in with the wrong guy, and probably the first girl he's ever been with is essentially underage due to this man. And so I went back and forth with him in my mind, just like trying to somehow defend him because he's my brother and I know the way he thinks. But at the end of the day, like, he did it. At the end of the day, he did do that, and he has to pay for that.
How old is Torrance and how old is Liddell?
So Torrance is 2 years younger than me. He's going to be 35.
Yeah.
Liddell, I want to say, is probably 43, 44, somewhere in there.
And are both of them's current? They're both of them are charged in this matter.
Yes, both of them are in
Yeah.
prison right now.
Does
I
Sam
also have a sister in prison, and my third mom is in prison as well.
These were the women who helped
help
Sam
orchestrate
with the
this?
kidnapping and that stuff.
Right.
Right.
So it sounds like a lot of his
My under Yeah. Sorry, go
it
ahead.
sounds like a lot of his followers have gotten charged and are, standing trial. But is there a group outside of, I guess, prison right now that still follows Sam and is still like orchestrating things like
Does
this?
he have a
Does he
follow?
still have an active group?
Yes, I believe so. Um, it's very interesting to see. Like I was saying, commandments expiring. You lose that pressure on you, and you see people kind of get a little more lax. So yes, the answer to that is definitely yes. To the level at which they're following him, I don't know. I don't know if they're gradually drifting away. I know they're a little more open. Like I can drive over and talk to my mom. I mean, if she's outside or if she's there, she'll talk to me.
Is she a
But
follow? Is she a follower of
Yeah,
Sam?
she's still in.
yes, yes.
Wow, that's
So
so. And I don't know if people, you're right, in the outside world can appreciate how hard that is for you to have that kind of chasm between you and your mother.
Yeah.
well, I had to compartmentalize that a long time ago. When I got sent away, that's when that began. And there's something that people won't really understand. When I got sent away and went and found her, and I says, "Yeah, I got sent away." She says, "Well, that's the best thing that could happen." And it's because she's an optimist, and she looked at this as my next step to being better. She always held me in the highest esteem. I had other women call her and try to tattle on me, and she would say, "Well, he's doing exactly what he should be doing." She always afforded me the utmost confidence, and I'll always appreciate her for that. And she's a caregiver. She takes care of old people, or people that are mentally handicapped, or she was a nurse, or she is a nurse, and was just selfless. But she's selfless to a level that I realized kind of neglected her own family in a way. She took care of everyone. So I had to compartmentalize her a long time ago when I was sent away, and it was just too painful. So I'm used to it now. She's still my mom. And yeah, I've essentially thought, if she didn't do anything else for anybody again, she's already done more for a lot of people than most people do in their lives. And so I've compartmentalized her in that way.
What does she say about the charges that are facing Sam? I mean, you said that they're a little bit more open to different perspectives now that he's facing all these charges, but what does she say about this whole ordeal?
Or do
I
they
mean, it's
talk?
her family too. It's her niece or grandnieces and granddaughters, obviously.
I mean, essentially religious persecution. That's how you could put it in a nutshell. It's all religious persecution to them, and it's really interesting the way that they'll weave this together. Say my third mom, one of her best friends went to her and was saying, "What about this? This is weird. Like Sam marrying young girls, Sam doing this stuff." And she said, "Look, there's so many rumors going around about us, and nobody will come and ask us directly." And so she says, "Okay, I'm asking you directly. What's going on? What's happening?" And instead of answering her, she said, "Do you think if you knew what God wanted you to do, you would do it no matter what?" And essentially, I mean, if that's not an answer, I don't know what is. Like you need to be at our level of commitment to this, and then we'll start sharing with you the messed up things that we're doing, essentially.
Do you look back and see the sort of power plays that as an adult you've seen Sam utilize in your family, the same sort of psychological power plays that Warren used, to control his flock? I mean, ripping families apart seemed to be one of the most strategically wise things Warren did because it gave him control over everybody. Nobody had real family structure. And over the last, 30 years, tearing the families apart, I think, has worked to his advantage. Sam seemed to adopt some of the same strategies. Yes, sir. What do you think about that?
Maybe I think in a lot different way. It's very, very easy for me to demonize Sam. It's a lot tougher for me to just demonize Warren because I was committed there too. And
Yeah.
to do that, I kind of have to, it's like I have to gut out a part of me
Don't
and
do it here.
analyze it. And I've done it many times.
Yeah.
Right. And so analyzing Warren, I mean, yes, there was some very weird things. And I think I think there would be some value in sharing this. So my dad is wrapped up in the Sam thing, and his story would be very much, it's a very interesting aspect that can kind of weave these two men together in a way. So Warren kicked my dad out in I think 2006, told him, you need to leave, and God will reveal to you what you've done. And so dad left, packed up. He called me and told me he was going, but this was already established by then how this goes. You leave, you don't talk to your family, you don't do anything. And the way that he felt, if he came to his family and said, hey, I'm told to send away, like, I want to gather you guys and leave, we would have ostracized him. We would have said, yeah, you're an evil apostate and we won't have anything to do with you. So he felt like he was doing the best thing for his family to leave. And he was essentially gone for 9 months. And then got a call from someone. I mean, he went through hell. He went through hell. He was a very intelligent guy. He didn't know what he'd done wrong. He hatched up things from his teenage years that he thought was the reasons he got sent away. And he threw away all of his teachings and trainings and all this stuff that Warren had that was like an anchor to people in the FLDS. And he was essentially living on the streets of Boise. And he had an RV and he'd go to the park every day. And this guy's a A&P mechanic. He has an airline transport rating, pilot. He has a degree. He has he's very intelligent. And he was shoveling manure for farmers up there. So he got a call after 9 months, was allowed to go work for what we would term a priesthood company. And this was like, I mean, being reborn for him. This was huge. But he didn't have his family back. He was allowed to work with them, essentially be a part of the people. But if he ran into one of his boys on this job site, he was to refer to them as his brother, not his son. So for 10 years, what is it now? Almost 20 years, then he put us in the category of not his family.
Wow.
We didn't belong to him. And then when this whole Sam thing happened, Liddell Jr. called him because he'd been gone. He was not allowed to go to the creek really, unless it was a very special occasion. Lud called him and was somehow termed this to him, saying, Sam's the new guy, or Sam's the next bishop, or however he got dad to show up. Dad showed up, was a part of the group, was allowed to go to the creek. He got his airport back. He was instrumental in putting the airport at Colorado City. He was the guy, and it's his baby. So he got the airport back and essentially started that job over again as manager, and then had a falling out with Sam because of, for instance, that incident where Sam told the woman to get up and confess in front of everybody. That didn't sit right with my dad. And then it was little things like the moon landing. I mean, he touted education to us big time. We all went to school. We all were top of our class. We had a lot more of what would be termed by other FLDS Gentile influences in our lives, the music, a couple of movies here and there. We're very read in the aviation world. So him coming back to there, arguing the moon landing, Sam telling him you're out of order, and father is just like, "Hey, I'm out. I'm done." There was a certain point where he's just like, I'm done." And so
But
he moved out to the airport
yeah,
and had nothing to do with Sam after that, and they actually termed him as an evil apostate. So then his daughters get taken by the state, and he's in this place of, these aren't my daughters, because that's what he's trained himself to think for 20 years, to be in the good graces of Warren and the FLES, who he hasn't talked to for 20 years. And so he's asking some of these other FLDS, his family, his brothers, he's like, "Hey, will one of you guys help me?" And they basically said to him, "Not until we get a directive from Warren." To him, that's like, no, we're not going to, because nobody talks to Warren. So there came a point where he broke and was like, "I have to do something." And he started doing what a dad should, and trying to be there and trying to explain to the state, "No, I didn't abandon them. I did the best thing that I could for them, that I felt like." And the state's like, "Yeah, you abandoned them. Of course you abandoned them." But to him, he's like, no, and he will never admit that he abandoned his family because he didn't feel like he did. But that was driven by Warren, and then exacerbated by Sam. And now he spends almost every weekend with his daughters and his nieces in Phoenix. He flies down every weekend and
that's a,
and
that, that's
spends
a
time.
great story.
Yeah.
And it's, it's like so many of this families, you don't think, how does Warren do all this? Because good, hardworking men like your father believed in him and tried to do what they thought was the right thing. And it's just led this family destruction. There's now two, three generations now of families that have been gutted like yours. And then they're easy to pick off the individual pieces or the damaged pieces. And so, I mean, I don't, I'm just thinking this through now, but it's just so cruel. So what these guys have been able to do over these last several, uh,
Obviously, it took you a while to kind of come to a place where you can be more critical of, how you were brought up. But what do you
Right.
say to people that are still in? Like, do you try to kind of talk to them about what the outside world is like? Obviously, they're very shut towards the outside world, but I mean, do you think it's important to get more people out, or what's your thought on that?
I actually have some very mixed feelings around it. And here's why. I think that, again, I prefaced this whole thing with talking about my childhood and how I enjoyed growing up that way. It was when it was just the principles and this, small town lifestyle, essentially. And I mentioned that I grew up in different circumstances than a lot of people there. It was a great way to grow up. It wasn't until Warren started putting more pressure that we stopped going camping all the time, and we stopped doing fun things because we need to focus on the Lord's work or whatever. So the short answer is this: yes, I feel like everybody should leave there. I feel like it should be, yeah, get out. It's limiting your potential. Now, with that being said, I think that when you grow up in a way that people are telling you what to do all of the time, it can be hell to realize that you are accountable for your own decisions. And it can be a long process to realize that you're it. You have to make a decision and you have to go for it. And it's a very, very hard, tough road, from everything from getting a job to dating. It's all rough. And so maybe there's some certain number of people that the simplistic lifestyle of just being there and having that confidence that, what, I'm doing the right thing. It feels good. It's a good way to live, I guess, without this quandary that you see people spiral sometimes when they hit it, get into drugs, get into a lot of vices, I guess. And so I have mixed feelings around it. So
How do you
yeah,
help people? I mean, what helped you kind of
I
not
I
spiral?
tend I tend to take a very, very gentle approach with people. There's some that, I mean, like your dad, that like to go bust doors down and get some answers and push this thing until it comes to a head, right? I'm more of a listen to their perspective, put a little, worm in their ear, talk them through it, talk about, I've been to so much therapy. And I think that people essentially leave there with this is true with any kind of trauma. They leave there with two, or there's three different versions to deal with this. Either you become it. This is you. You're defined by your past. You're defined by the FLDS and this trauma and whatever it is. Or it never happened to you. You have to completely cut it out and leave it and move on. And if someone brings it up, it's like, I don't ever want to talk about it. Or there's integrated. And I feel like the healthiest approach is to integrate it. Talk about it when you need to talk about it. And that includes processing through it. And to process through it, talk to people about it. And so I try to kind of be that entry level uh, therapist per se, because for most of them to get therapy is weakness. So try to put that in their ear enough to where they will actually start making those choices. And we've got most of our family out by now. So
Wow.
You're a wise man and full of wisdom and sort of profound insights. I feel so grateful to you for shedding some light on. What
Yeah.
do we learn from a guy like Sam? We're gonna. I guess it's probably gonna get some coverage. It's
I
certainly
would hope so.
it's gotten some
Got
pretty.
some good headlines thus
Yeah,
far, so
yeah. It
hopefully they
seems
don't
like a
stop.
lot of people paying attention. What do you hope people take away from Sam? What do you hope happens to Sam?
well, I mean, I my dad's hopeful of the death penalty. but
Don't
but
think that's an option here.
it's what?
I don't think it's an option in this one.
I
Not
don't think so, but
with the
it would be.
but he's got some serious charges that
Yeah,
can put him away for the
very
rest of his.
Right. I'm satisfied with life in prison. That would be good enough for me. Uh, yeah, I put him in Gen Pop.
That he wouldn't last long. What do we take away from this story? What do you want us? We're talking about this all the time, and it's still trying to make sense of guys like Sam, guys like Warren, people who follow them, people who have to get out of it and spend
these
some.
charismatic leaders who invoked fear in groups of people to follow them.
Yeah, it's just it's a sort of a big topic, and you probably have seen it up closer than most folks. What's your takeaway?
So I think one of the things that's important to me that people could learn from an experience like this with Sam is there's a ton of people surrounding Sam who aren't bad people, who got wrapped up in this thing, who are dealing with pressures and requirements on a level that most people wouldn't even begin to understand. And all it takes for them is one little sidestep out of that to start the process. And sometimes that process can be, I mean, it was 10 years for me.
Wow.
If I could put a number on it. So there's a ton of good people around them. And so to not judge them too harshly, obviously if the law is broken, if they do something outside of the law, they need to pay for that. And that's one of the things. Yes, there's consequences for your actions. And it's usually you learn that when you're a toddler, but some of us it takes a little longer, and you start throwing some of those consequences at some of them, and maybe they'll get the picture. But um, there's a ton of people thinking that could never be me. That could never be me. I'm like, there's cult mentality everywhere. So I mean, cult and culture. I think that taking that away is, look, this could be you in any area of life. You could be latching onto a cult mentality. And so takeaway, be open-minded. And when you see people in a cult, be open-minded towards them. And it'll take both types of people. It'll take people to bash the doors down, and it'll take people to, gently whisper, words against what they believe to gradually get them to leave. But I think that's a takeaway.
I think that's a good takeaway that we should all stand by.
Wow.
Communicate more.
Definitely,
More discussions.
We knew that this guy was going to give us some heavy stuff.
Profound.
Some heavy stuff.
I feel like that's such a good note to end on.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we scratched the surface on, Sam, and we want to give people some insight into who this guy is, but we recently were talking to members of the LeBaron family. You're familiar with that? And they have a big documentary. And in many ways, the takeaway from that documentary, we spoke to two of the women, the LeBaron women who were in that main spot, and their takeaway was the same thing. Recognize that there are a lot of good people that get caught up in this craziness. And unless you've sort of walked in their shoes, you're not going to really be sympathetic. But when you get, you get a guy like Ervil LeBaron, you get a guy like Sam Bateman. You get and many of these characters we talk about, when you get them in charge, and
Manson,
people,
you could throw in there, he made people do.
Certainly a cult with Manson, at varying degrees and various personalities, but a lot of good people end up doing some really bad things in the name of that.
Right. Yeah, I agree. There's something else I'd bring up a little bit too, and this is why I've chosen to take the approach I do. When I was in the FLDS, if you had walked up to me and said, what was it? You have a classic line on the news. Mr. Jeff, did you rape those young girls? Or whatever he said on the Texas thing. If you had said something like that to me, I would have shut off to you internally. And even after I left, it probably would have taken me years to get back to a point where I could sit down and have a conversation, but it would be in my subconscious that you are an evil person because you were talking bad about Warren to me. Right. So some of these people, it's like a very, very calculated approach. That there's this, it's like walking up to one of them and saying, yeah, Jesus was a real piece of shit, wasn't he? And it's like, whoa, I will not hear another word that you say to me. Right. So, yeah.
Well, I felt like there was a time when it was so secret and everything was behind closed doors. There was a time the handful of us needed to kick down some doors and break some windows to let some light in. But I've tried to sort of back away from the healing. There's lots of good organizations up there now trying to do, but I don't have the bedside manner. You're right. I'm better kicking down. I'm better than kicking down doors.
A little rough around the edge.
It takes both.
But both. There's great change in Colorado City today because there have been people who, first of all, broke down the walls, but then went in and took care of the needs of the people behind those walls. And all of that's been important in the evolution of this story.
Yeah.
Well, listen, you're always welcome on our show. You did not disappoint.
Yeah, thank you.
Right after, when I first met Sam and put that photograph up, members of your family, no idea what I was dealing with. And then I got heard from you, I think was the first call. So you should know who this guy was. And that's what I was hoping for, a quick study. And you really have been so helpful in guiding me. And I think,
what a rabbit hole it has been.
Yeah, it is sort of a rabbit hole, but a fascinating rabbit hole. And it brings us to the people who end up making the real change.
Yep.
People who are in it, got out, and started doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us will be trying to make sense of all of this for many years to come.
Will you come back and join us again?
Yeah, anytime.
Sure. Yeah. At some point, I have something interesting to say, I guess.
We're going to go back. We're going to go down to Sam's hearing on April 1st, see what the status thing is. And again, it seems like a number of people in his orbit are copping to lesser pleas without being sentenced, which tells me they're going to go in and unload on Sam and make an example of Sammy.
Yeah.
It'll be good to seeing them do that. Yeah. Can't wait.
All right, sir.
Yeah. Signing off. This is Story Hustler. Thank you again. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.